All right, good afternoon and welcome to the Best Practices for the Advancement and Inclusion of Women in STEM and National Security webinar series presented by CRDF Global's Women in Science and Security Initiative. The first segment of this webinar series will focus on CRDF Global's recently published Best Practices Guide written by Kate Hewitt, Sylvia Mishra, and Kimi Ma. Founded in 1995, CRDF Global is an independent nonprofit organization that promotes international scientific and technical collaboration through grants, resources, training, and services. Originating in Arlington, Virginia, with growing offices in Eurasia and MENA regions, CRDF Global works with more than 40 countries in the Middle East, North Africa, Eurasia, Asia, and the Western Hemisphere. CRDF Global's Women in Science and Security team is an initiative to support and spearhead equality efforts for women around the world, including subject matter experts, professors, and leaders. Our efforts have included events such as breaking barriers, webinars, and publications such as the Best Practices Guide, which we will be discussing today. There will be a 30-minute question session at the end of the discussion for participants to engage with panelists. Please note that you can type your questions into the Q&A box at any time. We will record them and present them during the question and answer session at the end of the discussion. We simply request that if you would like to direct a question to a specific speaker, please note that as part of your question. The webinar will be moderated by myself, Jocelyn Trainer, and my colleague, Marion Finocchiaro. Today, we are joined by some exciting speakers to kick off the webinar series. This includes two co-authors of the guide and two International Visitor Leadership Program alumni. Without further ado, I will turn to my colleague Marion to introduce our IVLP alumni.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our first webinar session. It is my pleasure to introduce two incredibly inspiring IVLP alumni in the field of STEM. Our first speaker is Ms. Marcela Araya Fonseca, who is an electronic engineer from the Technological Institute of Costa Rica. She has more than 15 years of experience in developing processes for new products combined between the microprocessors and medical devices industries. She plays a working mom role with a huge passion to create STEM opportunities for girls 6 to 9 years old so that they may have different life choices and decisions available to them. She is an IVLP alumni who participated in the 2017 Tech STEAM Women Leaders from Costa Rica project, and she is an active participant in women initiatives to advance their careers and a member of the Society of Women in Engineering. Welcome, Marcela. It's an honor to have you here with us, and we look forward to learning about your experiences. Our second IVLP alumna speaker, also with us today, is Dr. Muna Mohammed Musnad, who has more than 20 years experience as a researcher at UNESCO Chair in Water Resources, Durman Islamic University in Sudan, and more than 9 years as a consultant at KIMA Consultancy. She was and is still involved in many local, regional, and international research projects. She is a coordinator and secretariat of the Integrated Water Resources Management Network in Sudan, and a key participant in the Women in Water Diplomacy in the Nile Network. Dr. Muna also worked as a regional researcher and coordinator for the Nile Basin Capacity Building Network River Engineering Project, and she is an IVLP alumna of the 2017 Women in STEM Multi-Regional Project and a lecturer of the Masters in Science program in Environmental Engineering at Durman Islamic University. It is a pleasure to have you here with us today, Dr. Muna, and thank you for taking the time to speak with us about your personal and professional experiences.
Thank you.
We were connected with both of these wonderful IVLP alumna through Global Ties San Francisco. Global Ties San Francisco is a division of the World Trade Center Northern California, a community-based nonprofit organization in California that hosts over 800 international leaders in the San Francisco Bay Area each year for short-term professional and diplomatic exchanges, primarily through the U.S. Department of State's International Visitor Leadership Program. Thank you for partnering with us on this event, and we look forward to continued collaboration in the future. We also have two of the best practices guides authors with us who will be speaking today, and I'll hand it back to Jocelyn to introduce them.
Thank you, Marianne. I would like to first introduce Ms. Sylvia Mishra, author of Chapter 4 of the Best Practices Guide. Sylvia's research focuses on nuclear strategy and nonproliferation, Southern Asian security, and emerging and disruptive technologies. She leads the CBRN Working Group for Women of Color Advancing Peace and Security and is a mid-career Cater Scholar at CSIS. Sylvia was an Indian U.S. Fellow at New America, a Socio Fellow at the Nuclear Threat Initiative, Visiting Fellow for Nonproliferation Studies, Carnegie New Leader, and worked in New Delhi at the Observer Research Foundation on India-U.S. defense and security ties. Her publications include chapters in books, articles in journals, commentaries, and opinion pieces, and she was featured in Women in Foreign Policy. Mishra holds a Bachelor's of Arts in Political Science from Hindu College, University of Delhi, a Master's of Science in International Relations from London School of Economics and Political Science, and a Master of Arts in Nonproliferation and Terrorism Studies from the Middlebury Institute of International Studies, and is currently pursuing doctoral studies. We also have the author of Chapter 2, Ms. Kimmy Ma. Kimmy is a project associate in CRDF Global's Strategic Trade and Border Security Division and manages the Women in Science and Security Initiative. Kimmy first came to the organization as a health and biosecurity intern in 2019. Before joining CRDF Global, she was a research intern at the Harvard Stem Cell Institute studying liver regeneration in zebrafish and a research scholar at the Dartmouth Hitchcock Medical Center studying orexin neutrons in rats. During college, she served as a senior coordinator for the college's Women in Science Project peer mentoring program. Kimmy holds a Master's of Science in Biohazardous Threat Agents and Emerging Infectious Diseases from Georgetown University and bachelor's degrees in molecular biology and Japanese from Dartmouth College. She is a recipient of the Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center Neonatology Research Award at the New England Science Symposium for her work through the Harvard Stem Cell Institute. Thank you both to the co-authors of this lovely guide for joining us for this discussion. As I mentioned, CRDF Global staff will be moderating this discussion. I would like to introduce our first moderator, my coworker, Ms. Marianne Finocchiaro, who is the Travel and Logistics Coordinator for the IVLP portfolio at CRDF Global. She has a background in international law, human rights, and international exchange. Marianne is excited to have the opportunity to collaborate with Women in Science and Security Initiative at CRDF Global to facilitate this webinar and future events, with the goal of promoting voices of women and IVLP alumni in STEM and national security.
Thanks for that introduction, Jocelyn. I'd like to take this moment to introduce Jocelyn as well. Ms. Jocelyn Traynor is a project lead in CRDF Global's Strategic Trade Control and Border Security Division. Jocelyn manages CRDF Global's Robin Copeland Memorial Fellowship, which provides women from emerging nations with the opportunity to advance their careers and become leaders in non-proliferation and nuclear security. In addition to this work, Jocelyn works on programming related to nuclear security and counter-proliferation with a focus on sanctions enforcement. Prior to joining CRDF Global, Jocelyn served as an international program coordinator at the Quixote Center, where she worked on programming related to women's economic advancement within agriculture and animal husbandry in both Nicaragua and Haiti. Jocelyn holds bachelor's degrees in both political science and Spanish from Loyola Marymount University. Thanks so much for moderating this session for us, Jocelyn, and I'm going to let you take it from here.
Thank you, Marianne. Today in our discussion, we will be first reviewing and discussing Chapter 2, which focuses on imposter syndrome. I will turn to the author of the chapter, Kimmy, to provide an overview for us.
I was muted. Hi everyone. So I'm also going to give, kind of as a preface, an overview of the Women in Science and Security Initiative team. So we are a CRDF global internal initiative to support and spearhead equity efforts for women around the world, including subject matter experts, professors, and leaders. And our efforts have included events such as Breaking Barriers, which is an annual discussion and roundtable that we do each year, a webinar series such as this one, and also publications such as the guide that we'll be discussing today. And without further ado, just to make sure that everyone is on the same page, in case some of our attendees haven't been able to read the guide yet, imposter syndrome is defined as a feeling of not belonging or lacking the credentials to deserve to belong in whatever community that that individual has now joined. And it is not officially diagnosable as a disorder, but the American Psychological Association acknowledges that it is a very real and specific form of intellectual self-doubt. So what does that mean? It means that we have these women who are reaching all of these wonderful goals, making top achievements, getting into high-level positions or competitive organizations, but they don't feel like they should be there. And while writing the guide, Sylvia and I discussed, as I'm sure many of us in this virtual room can relate, that we or women around us have felt sometimes or often that our achievements were flukes, that it was all luck. Now, I want to assert, and it's easy, especially for me to do so for Sylvia, that that's not true at all. But it's not as simple, right, as just building your own self-esteem or confidence. It's an issue of systematically and implicitly, unfortunately explicitly in some cases, on an international scale, we're teaching girls starting as young as middle school that they're not cut out for STEM, or that they're not supposed to be scientists, or that boys are inherently better at the sciences. And then they grow up and that basis is like complemented by factors such as workplace harassment, discrimination based on traditional gender expectations, and negative feedback loops of skewed gender ratios, which further discourage women from entering into the fields. Not to mention, in many workplaces, women are forced to walk this thin line of acting masculinely enough to advance their careers and advocate for themselves, but they can't be too bold, they can't be too assertive, or else reversely, they're deemed undesirable as coworkers and managers. So we have stories like this on this slide where a man is blatantly reinforcing a woman's imposter syndrome. He said, well, of course you got the job. We needed our token female. Now, nowadays, we have more subtle circumstances, but the implicit signaling does more than enough talking. And so imposter syndrome is still a very real problem that disproportionately affects women and gender minorities more than men. And we need everyone to pitch in on changing that. So today, we'll hear from female experts in STEM and national security and how they've learned to tackle imposter syndrome in their own careers. And I'm super looking forward to the discussion.
Thank you for the wonderful overview of your research and the work you produced. Kimi, before we turn to discussion revolving around imposter syndrome, I would like to turn to several of our panelists to discuss how they first became involved in their respective industries and fields, as well as a bit of an overview of their career. So Dr. Muna, I would like to turn to you first to address how you became involved in your industry.
Yeah, thank you, and hi everyone. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I studied my primary and secondary school at Saudi Arabia because my father at that time was working as a teacher there. And in the second grade of the school according to the Saudi system courses or literary courses. And at that time, I selected the scientific course. And then after completing the secondary school, I returned back to my home, to Sudan, and I was planning to study the civil, the chemistry engineering, because I'm so interested in the chemistry science. But I was accepted in the civil engineering instead. And then when I finished my background, when I reached the fourth year of the university, there were three options: either to go to structure or hydraulics, because water and chemistry has a strong link. And then when I finished the MSc, the bachelor degree, I traveled to Tanzania, and I did my MSc in water resources engineering, and then at the Ministry of Irrigation and Water Resources. And then I shifted to work at UNESCO Chain Water Resources, which is hosted by Omdurman Islamic University. And while my working at UNESCO Chain Water Resources, I did my PhD at the university, and now live. And actually, they have very strong interconnection with chemistry and engineering, and that is I eventually fulfilled my desire to study a chemical engineering in one way or another. And this is my education journey.
Thank you very much, Dr. Muna. Marcella, I would like to turn to you to give us a bit of an overview of, as Dr. Muna so aptly put it, your education and career journey.
Sure, can you hear me well?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. So good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you for this great opportunity. I feel very, very blessed and happy to be here. I'm Marcela Raya, as I was introduced to all of you. And I studied electronic engineering in one of our public universities here in Costa Rica. I'm from Costa Rica. And the reason why I started studying this was because I used to be a regular student, not the best of my class, but I always was very curious on mathematics and chemical. And so I did my research on where were the careers, having these specific subjects. And one of the most difficult by then, and it's still one of the difficult here in our country, was electronic engineering. So I wanted to take that challenge and demonstrate myself that I could overcome that specific career. So the reason why I started this field was because of the math and science interest, and because of a real challenge for me on studying something that was difficult and that was not a women field, not even today, but by my time, even less women were there into that specific career. That's my story behind.
Thank you very much, Marcella. Sylvia, I think you can anticipate the question coming, but can you please also provide us with an overview of your educational and career journey?
Thank you, Jocelyn and Marian, for having me and hosting me this afternoon. First of all, I would like to underscore how excited I am to be on this panel with Marcella and Dr. Muna. So this is a little nugget of information. My father was an IVLP fellow, and as a child, knowing him undertaking this fellowship, I was completely starry-eyed about it. So it is an absolute honor. I'm so thrilled to be on this panel with Marcella and Dr. Muna. And also, thank you so much for setting the stage for such interesting conversations this afternoon. Before I quickly speak about my career journey, I think I would like to take this opportunity to highlight and underscore why we wanted to go ahead and do this best practices guide and the rationale driving this project, which also kind of really ties into my career journey. So starting with why this project now is over time we have realized that there is an acute problem in both the STEM and national security sector of not highlighting or bringing into prominence the contribution of women. A lot of the discussions that happened during the 2019 Breaking Barriers Roundtable uh, that was hosted by CRDF kind of really put a lot of these concerns into prominence, and that is what really guided us, Kimmy from CRDF, Kate, and myself to come together and look at what are some of these challenges which acts as barriers and which prevents a healthy pipeline of women in STEM and national security. And to maintain an inclusive pipeline, whilst doing our research, we realized that it is extremely essential to maintain a country's economic primacy and competitiveness, and to highlight the ways which organizations can undertake and adopt some of the best practices to go ahead and underscore the importance of having a more diversified and more inclusive pipeline is what guided us to undertake this project. Saying that, I quickly jump into my career. I was always fascinated by Western and Indian philosophers, and I undertook my journey to work on and study political science for my undergraduation. And over time, I increasingly realized that we face several key national security challenges. But it was not up until this conference in Vienna that I attended, where I really understood the importance of the understanding the technical aspects related to nuclear policy and strategy. And it was then where I really started focusing on figuring how one can like equip oneself and train oneself to understand nuclear non-proliferation, arms control, nuclear strategy issues. And one thing led to the other, whilst I was told often and many times that nuclear policy is a very technical issue and not really meant for girls, women. Maybe just stick to foreign policy analysis of the work that you do. But as always, I decided to put my foot down and train and equip myself on very technical issues. And so far, it has been only rewarding. And whilst doing this work, it's only amplified the need to encourage more and more women to partake in STEM and national security domain. I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. And Kimmy, may I turn to you with the same question to round us out, please?
I think my journey is a lot shorter than everybody else's, but just very quickly, I went to undergrad at Dartmouth College, and I went in with a hard set, like a completely set mindset to be a doctor in the future, and kind of kept up with that for a while. And I liked my STEM classes, but I wasn't great at it, and also I always missed some of the social sciences. And also, like, one of my majors was in Japanese. I've always loved culture. I've always loved connecting with people. And so when I went into my master's, I started considering, is there a way for me to help people on like a really large scale while also kind of incorporating my science background? And I pivoted towards a national security, public health angle, and kind of through connections through Georgetown, they recommended me to CRDF. They're like, it's a really good fit for you, try it. And here I am, came as an intern, now full-time, still loving it, and learning as I am teaching, I guess, about how much there is more to do for women in STEM and women in security, because I've felt it, other people have felt it, and we're improving, I think, as we're going to hear later on in this discussion. But we wrote the guide for a reason, and I'm excited to see where it'll go.
Thank you. Thank you to all our panelists for a brief introduction. And I think this more global view is gonna be great to facilitate our discussion today. So I would like to turn to the group to answer the first question. Have you ever experienced imposter syndrome in your education or career as a result of your gender? Part two of the question, if so, what have you found to be the most effective tools for addressing this feeling based on what you or others have experienced?
So maybe can I start with that question? For sure, I've experienced imposter syndrome since I joined electronic engineering. The first question I asked myself was, am I able and am I ready to do and to take this challenge? And I also heard a lot of people asking me, hey, this is a man career. Why are you signing in for this? So just I started asking myself if I was able to, and while doing all the different courses in the career, I found a lot of challenges coming also from my professors. Some comments randomly going in terms of, wait, are you sure you want to be here? And that was a difficult career as well. So I faced that, but at the same time, I need to say that I had a couple of colleagues, a couple of mates by then that really supported me. Not just with motivational phrases on, hey, you can do it, but also explaining me different topics I was not totally understanding. So I think it was following into the second question. It is very important to see if you're not able to, or if you feel you are not you're having fear of that's okay. If you're not understanding something, that's okay. That's why you have peers around you. You can go and ask, and you can overcome the challenges. So one of the things that I've been learning is you need to say, this is happening to me. You need to be conscious. You need to be aware and ask for help, and ask other women and other and other men as well, if they can help you, or what did you do in this specific situation. So I felt it, and I've learned to look for help.
Thank you. That is a very important note, that help is always needed. Would one other panelist like to answer this question before I address another question?
I can jump in. So whilst working on the guide and also just speaking to a lot of women experts, imposter syndrome is all pervasive. It's there, and we all at some or the other point of time have felt it, have experienced it. But the second part of your question is important, which highlights how we should be, or what are the things that we should do to overcome it. And one of the most important things I feel is embrace yourself, embrace your aspirations, your failures, your fears. Once you start with the process of acceptance, I think then you are able to find certain key tools or mechanisms or frameworks or networks to overcome that feeling. And very honestly, we have all of that around us. We do have our networks. we do have all the trainings and the tools. It's just important to be more cognizant of it, recognize it, and also it's important to reach out. So I would always say that first train yourself, embrace yourself, and then tap onto your networks and safe spaces to overcome these difficult feelings. But it starts with self-acceptance at first.
Thank you, Sylvia. I think, as you noted today, we're even more realizing how important it is to have self-acceptance before you're able to do a lot of these other things, such as Marcella noted, ask for help. Both you and Marcella touched on this a bit, but I would like to directly ask, and again, open it up to the wider panel for discussion. Is there any advice you would give to a young girl, perhaps yourself, 20 years ago, aspiring to work in STEM or security?
Yes, could I answer this question? Yeah, actually, the advice that I can give to the early career woman, first, she has to qualify herself academically, using innovation techniques, and even technologically. And because she has to put in her mind in what day she will be in the leadership position. And also she has to acquire herself with leadership skills like educational skills. And as also Celia said, she has to build her network from early. That the network can give her the support needed during her journey. And also she has to follow the science and inspire herself to become like them.
Jocelyn, can I quickly jump in?
Please do.
So one of the very important lessons that I have learned being part of this industry for almost 6.5 years and traversing between UK, dividing my time between Delhi and Washington, DC, is we put a lot of pressure on the word networking. For the longest time, I did not know what it really meant and what it entailed. Up until someone, a very senior person and a role model for myself, Rebecca Hirschman, at Simple. Do not put yourself under so much of pressure to like find networks or do networking, but instead make friends, have collaborators in the industry. And that is one thing which is extremely incredibly important. Once you have friends in the industry, then you're able to collaborate. And what a better example, and I cannot stop talking about a report. This report is actually an example, a good example of a report. It comes from the government sector. Both Kimi and I were working in think tanks, and we are from academia. And so we do come with very different strands of background and thinking. But what was really the foundation of this report was also this need to exchange ideas, collaborate on a topic that we felt very strongly about, and also just tap into our network of friends who gave us more details about how women feel, and basically underscore the importance of having an inclusive pipeline. So therefore, my one step guide is have friends, have collaborators, and I think teamwork makes dream work. So well, that's your key.
Yes, and just to echo in what Sylvia is saying, it relates to how authentic. If you are an authentic person, you will have friends, you will have collaborators, and you can have your dreams coming true. And so I follow you, and it's just go and be an authentic person, an authentic girl, an authentic woman, and then you will have this network coming in a natural way.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more.
I'm going to hop in on this from a slightly different perspective. I'm sure there's some competitive people in the room and who might not want to collaborate as much as some other people. But to that end, and I am not one to encourage gender expectations or to be siloed into what society says you should or shouldn't do. But if someone is insisting that STEM or national security is a boy thing, it's a man's world and women don't belong in it, then just tell them or tell yourself what men can do, I can do better, and I can do both what men and women and anyone under the sun can do. If you're the competitive type, if you're the collaborative type, go Sylvia's way. Don't do what I just said.
Thank you all for the wonderful advice. I really resonated with the fact that all of you touched on how important it is to be your true authentic self and, keep believing in yourself, and you will be able to collect others around you who are going to support you through this process. I think that is an outstanding piece of advice for young women and even older women like myself to remember as you grapple with your career education. Now I would like to turn to our Chapter 4 content, which Sylvia authored. Chapter 4 is titled, Where is the Data? Sylvia, could you tell us what this means and discuss a little bit about what you wrote in this chapter?
Right. So we just didn't go for the catchy title for the effect of it. We actually sincerely thought that it would make sense, and in the next couple of minutes I would try to explain to our listeners and everyone that what we really meant. So whilst identifying what are some of the obstacles which prevents women from joining the STEM and national security field is something that we realized is a lack of role models, and also the lack of visible pathways. Like, okay, what are the expectations from this job? Like, say for example, I'm a woman and I've pursued computer science engineering. Where are the role models, and why are we not hearing more about them? So when we started speaking to a lot of the participants who were part of the Breaking Barrier event, we came across this one singular fact / thought which kind of did run through the sinews of the report, is the fact that, and it is a fact because we have heard it a lot from a lot of different women, but it is a myth. Women are not as good as men in science and technology. And so we started with that premise of taking this myth and kind of dismantling it and disproving it through extensive research and data. Try to incorporate in our report, and search and data mining of what are the different records of women in history who have contributed to science and technology. And to that extent, we came across several studies. One of the most famous one was of Margaret Rossiter, who has written extensively that women scientists in America has not been given that due respect, that due share, that due recognition about their contribution in science, in scientific discoveries, in engineering, and in the various discoveries that has happened over time. So we went with this premise that we needed to break this myth, and to break the myth of that women are not as good as men in science and technology. We wanted to substantiate it with a lot of data, showcasing, well, here are several examples, scientific studies and books written about the contribution of women over history in scientific discovery. So when the next time one is going to raise a question about, well, like, what is the contribution of women, we wanted to showcase that, well, here's the data which points to the fact that women has been equally participating and equally contributing to the very vibrant field of science. And to that extent, we also looked at different interviews, and which formed a very key aspect of us writing the chapters and the entire report, because we wanted to premise it on interviews and on data mining. So whilst doing our interviews also, it was incredible how women scientists did point us to the directions of several scientific studies, which essentially showed that despite women's contribution, their acknowledgement were only relegated to the footnotes of the paper. So in our chapter, we say that this is not sustainable. Organizations need to take deliberate steps to make sure that the contributions of women are highlighted in bold and bright letters. So where is the data, to sum up, is showcasing that we should not be self-sustaining this truth of, this myth of women are not as good as men, and we substantiate it with historical data and also drawing from present day records of how women are equally competitive, equally brilliant when it comes to pushing the envelope when it comes to STEM and national security. So that was pretty much the crux of the paper and the methodology that we pursued to highlight some of the facts and outcomes of where is the data in our chapter.
Thank you very much, Sylvia. And I'm very happy to hear that you were able to find data and conduct interviews that kind of destroy that really dangerous myth for women and girls. On this subject matter, I would like to turn to the panelists with a question. Are there any myths or misconceptions regarding women's contributions or work style in the STEM and security fields that you would like disproven with further research and data?
So one of the things I've noticed now that I've been more involved in the manager as a manager in my area is how women progressed in my company. Now that I'm having manager eyes versus when I was an engineer in a specific process. So it's clear that that women are getting less into the leadership positions, and one of the things that came when there are performance reviews is are comments like I've been working with her, but not exactly seeing her contributions, not exactly seeing her results. But this specific guy is always raising hand and telling the team what he is doing. So in terms of how women make the contributions visible, it's different, and that is a bias in the middle management when there are performance reviews. So we need to be very careful, because women, we are different. We tend to say things different. We we show our results in a different way, and at the same time we need to be aware that we need to make our results visible in an authentic way, without becoming a man, or without becoming without having a man style, because we are women. But we need to make our results visible. So so there is data. There are results in my company coming for women. uh, uh, Great results in terms of, in terms of process improvements, in terms of scrap rates, that maybe are not visible, but are there. So we need to open our eyes, and just uh, be aware that we need to go on and see the results, and at the same time ask women to make them visible again in an authentic way.
Jocelyn, can I just take a quick stab at that?
Yes, please.
Okay, so we know how a lot of psychological studies are making an impact on the theory and the knowledge and pursuit of international relations, right? Over time, it has become more and more acceptable to fuse understanding of leaders' behavior, characteristics, psychology when it comes to national security policy making. So, teasing off from that standpoint, one myth that I would really like to over time to see get discredited and disproved is the fact that women are inherently they are peaceful or they are peacemakers. When I work in a hard security domain, when I'm working on nuclear policy making issues, it is important to underscore, and it is important that we all come from a similar kind of understanding that when it comes to policy making, women are equally as objective as men. So to say that women are inherently more peace loving is something, you are giving a very gendered characterization to an entire field of study. This needs to get discredited. And the reason why I mentioned that it is important to look at the psychological influences in international relations and national security policy making is to anchor. Right now we have this best practices guide report, and it is important to look at further research which can look and compare how women making are equally objective as men in national security or national crisis situation. So this is something that we can take the help of psychological studies and make a comparative analysis. So this is something I think I would like to see more further research which is backed with data in the future.
Dr. Muna, real quick, if you could unmute yourself while you're providing your comments, please.
Yes, I'm sorry. I can add something here regarding the assignment of women to do some work like to travel, to attend the conferences and something like that. When she couldn't able to do this, and she apologized for doing these things, she will not find excuse from her leadership. And if the men gave the same reason, maybe this is acceptable for the leader. What I want to say, you have to give some room for women, because she has another motherhood work in her home. And sometimes, for example, when I was leading some projects in my work, and I used to travel frequently to address the output in the conferences or like this. One time I couldn't go because my husband was in bad situation, a healthy bad situation, and I apologize. But my boss, no, I don't want to employ women in my work, because they always have their circumstances. But I could on a project that I was coordinator for it. All conferences, and at the end of the day, I was honored by the client of the funder from for the project. But even this project was abroad for my boss, but he doesn't acknowledge me at all when he speak about the successful of this project. But I cannot generalize this situation, because every person treats women from his own perspective. Because the present boss, my boss, his behavior is negative to the supports, and sign that we can, and always he said you can fit the assignment, whatever it was big or it is big. That's what I want to add. Thank you.
Thank you, Muna. And I guess, fortunately and unfortunately, it sounds like we have several more myths that are damaging to women out there that maybe we can tackle in our next best practices guide. I would like to ask the panelists, do you have any recommendations of how organizations can best support and promote female colleagues' work and contributions?
I will say to be trained in unconscious bias. I think that is a key element. So female and male can be aware of all of these judgments we used to have when there is a woman presenting, when there is a woman asking for results, when there is a woman asking for help. So we need to be aware that we all have unconscious bias. Even we as women have unconscious bias with other women, and we need to acknowledge it and to get trained. One of the things my company it's actually pushing a lot, it's that specific topic. So we cannot get into conclusions, or we cannot jump into conclusions on why a woman is not having these results. Instead, go and ask her. Go and ask her what were the results, or go and ask her why she's not applying for a position, instead of just assuming she doesn't want to because of X and Y. Go and ask. So, but this type of ideas only come with when you are aware and when you get trained on this topic. So I will suggest the organizations to get trained on this, and to be aware unconscious bias are all around.
I guess I'll hop in. Something that came up when we were writing the guide was this idea of women oftentimes are the spearheaders of initiatives to help other women. But in reality, we need everyone to be a part of it to really make a change. And I think the first thing is not even on an organizational level, but I implore if there are any self-identifying men on this call, on this webinar, please just bring yourself to the forefront and offer yourself as an ally, as a supporter of the women in your life and the women in your workplace. Because your voice is unfortunately stronger than ours sometimes when it comes to asking for things. And I would ask that you use that for a good cause like this. The other thing is just sometimes listen. This is like goes to everybody. We had someone who gave us during her interview a story where when she was working, it was in the public sector, I can't remember details, but she said that the women in the team had to rally together. And if one of their ideas was shot down or talked over, that another woman would repeat it and bring it back to the forefront in order for that idea to not be lost or to be like, unfortunately, like stolen kind of by somebody else who happened to hear it and be like, oh, that's a good idea, but not discuss it right then and there. Just listening sometimes is one of the most powerful tools that we have, because then you really hear what is needed, not just what you want to offer. So that is something that I hope, and along with the unconscious bias training, is somehow tell people like your role sometimes is just to listen and to hear what people are asking for. That's all.
I absolutely want to echo and amplify everything that Kimmy has just said. Those are really important points. My short answer is please read our best practices guide. We really have provided a good template for organizations to already follow and buttress and strengthen some of the existing policies they already might have to have more diversity. But one aspect which really spoke to me, and I think like a lot of the authors of the best practices guide, and also when we were having like larger conversations around it, is it's essential, absolutely essential for organizations to make good and like make visible the contribution of women. So at the end of when you're having annual reviews and coming up with your like annual newsletters, it's extremely important to not only just highlight what women at very top hierarchy of management has done, but also just highlight and promote like the work of younger women professionals. And as Kimmy very rightly pointed out, this is an initiative, this is a fight which is for all of us. It cannot happen in vacuum with just one portion of the population fighting for it. So we definitely need to have our male allies, and I think over time, increasingly, we are making a difference by having these very important conversations around this topic. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all for those very well thought out answers. As we kind of move towards the closing and question answer portion of our discussion, I would kind of like to pull things back out of scope and maybe look towards a more positive edge of our conversation. Marcella, Muna, I would like to direct this question to you first. How have you seen things change over the past 5 to 10 years? This can either be in your home country or on an international scale.
Yes, thank you. Actually, Sudan value women as her role or significant role in the society. But there is no policy for women in STEM or other fields that can frame the forward of women. But now Sudan is charging it is a new way for civilian life after 30 years of dictatorate regime. And now what they are calling for, they're calling for representation of women in decision making, not only for as a number. And now we are moving from treating women as victims to women as leaders, and from visibility of women as a quota, but for empowering her in decision making. And this is the first thing. The second thing is that UNESCO in Khartoum office started to launch some activities that can retain women in STEM field. And this is the first step that although the first club in Sudan was in 1917, it was early, but because of the non-constant constitutions and strategic policy and that things, because of political issue. Now we as a partner with UNESCO Khartoum office and with UNESCO chair for women in science and technology started to establish STEM girls clubs that can offer supporting for women from early stage. I mean, from preschool and primary and secondary school. This is a very good steps for forwarding. And also in the regional place contents. Now there are some international organizations that join Sudanese women to be as a leadership and to empower their skills and capacity and improve their capacity in the leadership. Like Siwi now, she is working in the water diplomacy field and encourage women to be effective in the decision making in the regarding the water sharing and sources benefits and all these things. And we started to rethinking again to think in a different way to achieve for collaboration in the Nile Basin as well. So I see there is a change in the concept of to more to implement women as a leadership in the all life of Sudan.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Buna. Very interesting to hear that. From my perspective, I think we have done a lot of progress in my country, in Costa Rica. From our Ministry of Public Education, there are specific efforts to include STEM in the National Educational Program as a specific and intentional efforts. Which is great. And also now having our social media, it's easier to see how women in STEM, Costa Rican women in STEM, are also having more visibility on their efforts and contributions. So this is great, and I think we have done some progress. In the other side, what is still lacking is to get into this rural area, which is also being covered by our public education. And that's why I'm still very, very interested on working with little girls from 6 to 9 years old from that public rural area, because they are not having the same opportunities, the same internet connections, the same choices. So the rural poor area, it's still uncovered, and we need to continue fighting for that.
I'll quickly hop in on the question. I really like this question. I think it provides us an opportunity to both look back and look forward. And in the process of doing so, we can have a very realistic understanding of where we were and where we are headed. And to that extent, I really appreciated what Dr. Muna and Marcella mentioned about intentional specific efforts, and it was really a great overview to hear from their country efforts. I would just like to make 2 points. It is important to understand that a lot of these conversations were happening, but happening also in a very muted manner. A lot of these conversations have once again come into very sharper focus now. So I think we have come a long way of understanding, recognizing some of the challenges and barriers that women face when it comes to STEM and national security. And right now we are also in the process of accumulating incremental steps, intentional steps and approaches that we are undertaking to dismantle some of these issues, and that is excellent. Adding to that, I would say that it is important to hear from women when they call out are being called out. Really appreciate that article on Article, which essentially underscored that, well, you cannot only have articles which references men's work. It is critical to also look at women's work and footnote them and underscore their contribution and amplify their voices and work. So a lot of these efforts are coming into sharper focus, and I want to be hopeful and positive about the direction that we are headed. There's a lot that needs to be done, but saying that, it is also important to just amplify that we are in the right track. As a member of the Women of Color Advancing Peace and Security and leading the CBRN chair at WCAPS, it is extremely vital for me to state that now we are having the conversations also to amplify the voices of diverse people and people of color and women of color in these national security and STEM discussions. And I would conclude by saying, well, when America leads and other countries follow, so the fact that we're having all these amplified conversations in the United States really pushes the envelope, and other countries follow suit. So I'm hopeful about more inclusive future. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you both, Muna, Sylvia, and Marcella, who had to drop off to commit to another engagement. Thank you. I'm very delighted to hear from all of you that you've noted positive change, with a caveat that there's always a need for more change. So I would like to go to several questions that we've received throughout the chat for you to answer. The first is, how do I change my mindset related to imposter syndrome when I feel like a cheat related to my performance or abilities? Or is this just internal insecurities?
Jocelyn, can you repeat that?
Yep, I will repeat it. The first question is, how do I change my mindset related to imposter syndrome when I feel like a cheat related to my performance or abilities? Or is this just internal insecurities?
I think a lot of us have struggled with this over the years. Let me start my video. So, I mean, it's a little bit of both, I think, but one plays into the other, right? Chicken and the egg. And I think one of the things that traditionally men have had more than women is the idea of like, not like just professional networks, but a network of people that will be your net. That like when you're feeling like you don't deserve it or your achievements are not yours because of luck or some sort of fluke, that they will reassure you, you got here for a reason and you're staying here for a reason and you're going to go up for a reason. If anything, I don't know. It's like clearly like you can try to work on your own insecurities, but it's so much easier to feel like you are you and you deserve what you have when there's people who believe in you just as much as you're trying to believe in yourself. So.
Can I also quickly jump in that very quick answer? I think battling internal insecurities is completely fine. It is totally acceptable, happens to every one of us. I had a major panic attack at 10:30 because I had to come on this panel and I was like, oh my God, do I really know what I want to talk, etc., etc. So it down about what it is that is bothering you, and have a conversation with yourself and some of your closer friends who can talk to you about like what are the ways you can improve and work hard on some of those insecurities. So I think jotting them down in your diary and like having a first conversation with yourself and then your friends is very important, because at the end of the day you really know you know your work, you know you are well equipped to deal with it. It's just that sometimes we also need a positive reinforcement. Find those people who are able to provide you with those positive reinforcements.
Thank you, Kimmy and Sylvia. Those are very important to know. Our next question also touches on imposter syndrome. How do you deal with imposter syndrome not only because of your gender, but also because of your race? Do you have any tips for overcoming that when you're the only woman of color on your team?
I think I can speak to that a bit. That's an extremely difficult question, but also such a pertinent question. And thank you really for asking that. I think the only way to really overcome some of these challenges is really finding your network. I think it is important to have safe spaces where you can have these conversations, and then basically telling yourself that even though you are the only person of color in a room, and maybe a lot of your colleagues and your mentors do not look like you, but you have gotten a seat at the table because of your merit, because of your hard work, and that shouldn't really detract from the work. And saying that, I think it is also important, whilst you know that you're there you have a seat at the table because of your merit and your sheer hard work, it is also important to have some of these safe spaces like WCAPs and several other initiatives that are coming up, which kind of provides these safer spaces and networks. So yes, but again, that's a very good question, difficult question, and not always we have the right answers, but that's why it's important to have collaborators, people who are able to positively help you and guide you and reinforce you in life.
Thank you for your answer, Sylvia. If there's no more responses, I'm going to move on to the next question, which is, On the topic of getting help, what role did mentorship play in helping you overcome imposter syndrome? And did you find that to be a viable support channel? As well as, do you have other recommendations? Kimmy, Sylvia, Dr. Muna, would anybody like to respond to this question? I'm happy to repeat it as well.
I guess I can kick it off. Oh, okay.
I can take the question. I was hoping someone else also spoke, but I can quickly just emphasize the role of mentors. Absolutely. I was born and raised in India. I studied there and I was working there. And then I moved cities and I moved to Washington, D.C. Initially, it was very difficult and all sorts of imposter syndrome, insecurities, feeling isolated were accentuated in a very large and focused manner. And one of the ways to really overcome that was like looking at role models, looking at mentors who could really help you navigate this uncertain, challenging, and also equally exciting domain of national security. So I would really emphasize that find your role models, and your role models do not always necessarily need to look like you or like, you know, be a woman, a mentor. It could be either a male mentor or a woman mentor, but like identify. And it is extremely important to also like have candid conversation about some of the challenges that you're facing. So I would play a pivotal like, you know, mentors play pivotal role in shaping your career. So do identify some of those mentors in your life.
Great, thank you so much, Sylvia. Kimmy, did you still want to jump in?
Yeah, I think I'm gonna kind of actually go back a little bit to the other question that mentioned being a woman of color, not just like one of the few women in the room. I'm gonna kind of talk about the stereotypes, I guess, but a lot of people think about Asians or Asian Americans as being, you know, like good at math or like leaning towards medicine or the science, like hard sciences, research in that area. And amongst my own family, I think I've struggled a little bit because very few people have had any interest in policy or government or anything related to that. And so I found myself where I am now, and I kind of thought, oh, why am I here? And when people tell me like you're here for a reason and it's because of your hard work, etc., I think I'm one that it's hard to go past like stuck in that humble imposter syndrome box and really understanding that like there's a reason I'm here. The person actually who I'm thinking of who is a mentor to me that kind of broke that cycle actually is not Asian American or Asian, but I can say that he is not, I don't want to say he's not American, but like he spent a lot of time overseas and understands that cultures can be very different and it can impact both how other people see you and then inherently how you see yourself. And he encouraged me to try to break away from to try to separate what other people were expecting of me and what I wanted for myself. Because it's really hard to do that when, say for instance, I've had someone say to me, oh, you're Asian, so you're good with numbers, right? And I almost looked at him and was like, what? It's situations like that where you just kind of have to bunker down and be like, absolutely not. Like, you can't assume things like that, or that you look at someone that you want to be almost, or someone that is in a position or has a history, a resume that you really look up to, and say that I can do that. And these are mentors who believe in me regardless of race or gender or religion or any sort of identity category, and ask them almost for advice, but also in their advice, oftentimes they will give you support and they will give you encouragement. And even if they don't, it's that thing of, even if they don't understand what you're going through, they can still push you to go past that box that you're putting yourself in. That's the best answer I can give. It's really difficult. I can personally attest to that, but if you don't feel good like doing it for yourself, then consider it like maybe you're doing it for all the generations after you.
Thanks for that response, Kimmy. Really appreciate that and your insight into your own experience. Because we're running low on time, we have about 8 minutes left. We're gonna move on to the next question. Someone had asked whether working late or odd hours is a great challenge, or she said actually working late or odd hours is a great challenge for the women of Bangladesh because of safety and mobility issues in public spaces. Do you think that this is a country-specific issue, or is it a global issue that women have to worry about in other countries as well? Dr. Muna, we haven't heard from you in a while. Is this a question that you would like to respond to?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the answer well. I have unstable internet in my side.
Okay, let me try again and see if you can hear. Working late or odd hours is a great challenge for the women of Bangladesh because of safety and mobility issues in public spaces. Do you think this is a country-specific issue, or is it a global issue that needs to be addressed? Okay, I'm gonna let someone else jump in and maybe we can have her respond later if she's able. Sylvia or Kimmy?
Yeah, I can speak to that. I think that is definitely a global issue. I think it is important to have safe and secure spaces, and especially when you're traveling back from me. I come myself from South Asia. It is definitely a challenge, but then it is just not a country specific challenge. It is a global issue, and especially in emerging economies and markets. And I think organizations should be taking important steps and positive steps towards looking at and combating some of these challenges. This is actually a great line of thought and thinking, and this is something that we did not touch upon in our report. So I have made a note of this, and in our subsequent discussion, I think this is a very key and important point to also address, as in how we look beyond the United States or some of the Western countries and look at women in STEM and national security in emergent economies. I definitely would see reason and rationale why this is a challenge. And thank you so much for bringing it up. And we have duly noted this barrier. Thank you.
Thanks, Sylvia. Yeah, I think it's really important to consider international perspectives, and that's definitely one of the main reasons we wanted to include women from all over the world in this webinar, because I think we're facing a lot of the same issues, but they also vary from country to country. And so when we're fighting for each other and when we are addressing these issues, like, it's important to know what women in other countries are experiencing. Does anybody else want to comment on that before we move to the next question? I think we have time for one more before we wrap up.
30 seconds for me. I guess building off of what Sylvia said is it is something that we were not able to address in the guide, and part of the reason for that is that because the issues will vary from country to country, the solutions will also have to vary, and we didn't want to create a blanket statement in our guide that would work for everyone, because it wouldn't. The culture is inherently different, and so what is acceptable and what is not is definitely going to change depending on where you are and what the workplace culture is. What I will say is that I almost want to increase the number of like international networks of women who are discussing issues like this, because as much as the culture, this almost reverses the answer I just gave, but as much as the culture is different, when you have that many people from that many backgrounds brainstorming together, then maybe there's a creative solution that if you silo it country by country, it won't come up.
That's a great point. Thank you, Kimmy. I'm gonna let Jocelyn ask the final question. We have about 2 minutes and then we'll close up after that.
Thank you. This question, I guess, really pivots us and lets us look to forward solutioning. The attendee asks, would it be worth hosting sessions in colleges when imposter syndrome can run high to address imposter syndrome and, you know, further promote women excelling in STEM and security fields?
Does Dr. Muna want to respond to that question?
Ooh.
I believe Dr. Muna is still experiencing some internet connectivity issues at this time. If Sylvia, yourself, or Kimmy would like to answer this, and hopefully we can get those issues fixed in time for her to provide an answer.
Yeah, I can jump in. Actually, during last week when we had this conversation among some of us, it was really impressive to hear one key point that Dr. Muna made, and I kind of want to amplify and bolster that point. And she spoke about being an advocate for your own self. I thought that was extremely important, and that really is at the crux of also combating some of the imposter syndrome. I know it is difficult to advocate for oneself when you are facing a lot of internal insecurities and really undergoing this process that do I really know my subject well, etc., etc. But I think we have to start with the premise that we have come with the right preparation. We have prepared well for either that job that we are doing or the subjects that we are undertaking in a university. So I would say it is important to accept oneself and accept that yes, you are going to feel imposter syndrome, and not just at the beginning of the career. I have been privy to so many conversations of very senior experts who also say that they are nervous before giving their keynote address or things like that. So we all go through this feeling, but I think in certain spaces, it is more systemic. So to overcome that, one of the the question has also an answer hidden in it is yes, definitely hosting sessions and training and mentorship towards combating some of these challenges is essential. But none of those trainings or positive actions would help up until you start from the premise that yes, you're going to face it, but you also have the tools and frameworks and equipments to better yourself, become better at your craft. I have been told so many times that nuclear policy issue is a technical field. But yes, it is a technical field. Yes, it was not easy, but I found myself the right mentors. I self-educated myself, and every time I'm having these panic attacks, I go back to my textbook. So it is important to self-train yourself, and of course, being part of the larger networks, holding sessions, etc., helps. But the key point is be a fierce advocate for yourself. Thank you.
Thank you, Sylvia. We are out of time. We're actually 2 minutes over, which is a good thing, which means that we had a robust discussion and a lot of engagement from our attendees today. I just want to thank all of our panelists and moderators, Sylvia, Dr. Muna, Marcella, who unfortunately had to drop off a little bit early due to a work commitment. And of course, Kimmy, who helped me plan this entire webinar. And I'm just so grateful to her for all the work that she's put in. And of course, Jocelyn for moderating the session. And thank you, of course, to all the attendees. We really appreciate you coming and engaging with us. And I know there's some questions that we didn't get to answer, so hopefully we can distribute those to the speakers after the fact and maybe get those out via email. And we also do plan to send out the recording of this webinar within 2 to 3 days, and we'll be having future events as well. So please stay tuned, and we hope to see you in the future. And thank you also to Global Ties for helping us set this up. It also wouldn't have been possible without their help in finding our speakers and doing the outreach. So thank you, everyone, and please fill out the survey after the fact so that we can incorporate your feedback into future events. Alrighty, take care. Bye.
Bye.